Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to Radio Wasteland. But, so we have a very exciting topic this evening.
Yes. For our listeners who haven't already heard the show in the future.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So our topic tonight is evidence of time travel with Rob Shelsky. And Rob actually does all sorts of stuff. He actually does research on all sorts of paranormal topics. But tonight we're talking time travel evidence. And
it's the first time we've done this. Yes, I love it too.
It's really exciting, and I think, normally I ask people how they got into this is the first question, but
how will you get into this?
Yeah. How will you get into this? I think my first question is going to be to get the argument out of the way of why do scientists say that time travel isn't possible?
I don't know that scientists
They have said
Some
that for years.
Say that.
And they also specifically have said that time travel backwards is impossible.
Okay. Well, time travel forwards is clearly possible.
Due to gravitation.
Yes.
Right.
Like it's happened, on tiny scales to like jet pilots and stuff.
Right. By nanoseconds.
Right, exactly. Right. And you can imagine that if you could get a craft going fast enough, you could send a person from now forward 50 years or so.
Yeah, well, Christopher Reeves, he, spun the Earth backwards.
Right, which I think most scientists accept as legitimate evidence of the phenomenon.
Well, yeah, Superman.
Right. He's all-American.
Right.
Superman wouldn't lie to us.
No, he's not allowed to. He believes in truth and justice in the American way.
That's true.
But is time travel one of those things that is...
Right, time travel backwards, I suppose you're right.
As a reader, I'm sure time travel has been something that has tickled your fancy for years.
Oh, absolutely. I love time travel. I love anything about time travel.
Yeah, when I think of time travel, the first story I think of is The Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury.
Oh, okay.
Where it's the time travel safari, and they go back in time to kill a T-Rex.
Right.
Yeah.
Not always the greatest of ideas.
No, but they timed it pretty good, but the one guy freaked out and he ran off the path and killed a butterfly, and then,
Right, which is fairly typical of Ray Bradbury protagonists.
Yeah, there's always a twist with Ray.
Yeah.
So, exciting topic tonight. Rob Shelsky with time travel evidence here on Radio Wasteland. Be sure to come on back.
Stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Rob Shelsky. Hi, Rob. We got you there with us?
Hi, how you doing?
Oh, not bad. I'm really excited to have you on here, and I'm really excited to discuss this topic.
Yeah, and I'm glad to be there, too. I love talking about this stuff.
Well, I really appreciate it. My first question, normally I ask people how they got into this stuff, but, you're really kind of prolific. You're kind of all over the place. You have studied a lot of different topics. But on this topic...
Yeah, I'm what I'd call eclectic.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the word, yeah.
On this topic specifically, all through kind of growing up and watching science shows and stuff like that, I've always heard scientists say that, like, traveling back in time is impossible.
Well, time is not impossible to travel through because Einstein's theory of relativity, the general theory of relativity, allows for it. And if it does allow for it, then chances are it's already happened. And the reason I say this is because if time travel is possible, and if someone in the distant future, or even the far past, say another extraterrestrial race, finally managed to do it, then it's already occurred and has been occurring throughout time. So my premise is that time travel is possible, and also that it has already occurred.
Yeah, I guess if it occurred at any point, then it's already occurred at every point, is kind of what you're saying.
Right, exactly. And it isn't just Einstein promoting this. There are other physicists as well that are promoting the idea of retrocausality in quantum physics. There is a physicist, Professor Ron Mallett, that is trying to create a time machine. There's even a man who supposedly actually created a form of time machine up in Toronto back in the early 50s, 60s, and 70s is when he was alive. And apparently he created something that we do have some evidence for having existed.
The one that I've heard about most recently in the mainstream news was somebody saying that we were capable of building a device where we could communicate over time, but we couldn't communicate any further back than the invention of that device because the device would be used for it. Is this ringing in any bells?
Yeah, Ron Mallett is trying to do that. He is trying to stir space-time with lasers to create a vortex in which you could send particles back through and theoretically, therefore, information. But
That's
as
the
with any
coolest
time
sentence
machine,
I've ever
you
heard.
can't go back before the time machine was invented. How could you? And, it would be against the laws of physics. However, we don't know when time machines were first invented and by whom. And also, there are natural occurring places in the universe where we might be able to create, to use them to travel through time into the past, such as a certain type of black hole, and a Kerr black hole, for instance. And if we did that, well, those black holes have been around for billions of years, so we could travel quite a ways back in time, given the right circumstances.
All right, you're kind of blowing my mind here. So I'm going to come out and say, what is it? So it seems like I remember like learning, there's space, there's time, and then there's space-time. What is it that we, and I'm talking on a mainstream level, what is it that we do know about time and our ability to manipulate that and really what it is? So time is more than just entropy or the rate at which things change. It's actually a physical characteristic?
Well, it's a functional part of space. That's why we call it space-time. The two are intertwined there as if they were one. We do know that we can travel into the future. We do it all the time. Our GPS satellites, for instance, have to be constantly corrected on an hourly, if not sooner, basis every day, because the atomic clocks on board them are losing, or actually they're going slower than the ones on Earth because of the theory of relativity. The faster something goes, the slower time functions. Since they're up in orbit and they're zipping around the planet, they're slowly regressing compared to the ones on Earth. And time slows for them, whereas it doesn't slow for us. So in a sense, we're already performing time travel. Astronauts that have been in space for a year or so actually have lost a couple of seconds compared to time on Earth, so they're actually slightly younger than we are. So we know that we can travel into the future using that method, but we also think we might be able to travel into the past as well, or at least send information into the past. With the idea of retrocausality, which they're coming up with now as one of the theories of the universe, theories of everything with the E8 emergence theory, they're talking about the fact that if we do something to twinned particles now, it backdates itself to the moment of their creation. So the idea of spooky action at a distance isn't real. It just looks that way because when we change one particle, if another particle is 5 light years away, it instantly changes too, and it shouldn't be able to because nothing can go faster than the speed of light, not even information, supposedly, and yet it does. But with the idea of retrocausality, that's done away with because what we do to the particle on Earth now retroactively changes both particles at the instant of their origin. And for instance, it's as if you burned yourself, or you're walking around one day and suddenly your arm is just on fire and it shows marks of having been badly burned. And yet you hadn't done anything to burn your arm. And then 3 days later, you spill a pot of boiling water over your arm. So the effect came before the cause. That's retrocausality.
And what you're talking about with these particles here is what I've heard of as quantum entanglement.
Right. It is twin particles, paired particles. They are twinned at the moment of their creation, and we can isolate one and change it. And if we do, the other one, no matter where it is or how far away it is, whether it's a few feet, a few miles, a few light years, or billions of light years, it instantly changes in reaction to the one being changed. And Einstein called this spooky action at a distance because we can't figure out how this is even possible. I mean, how do you do that? How do you send information faster than the speed of light? Einstein's theory of relativity rules that out. So either it's wrong or it could be retrocausality. We change one particle now, and the other particle that's 5 billion light years away is changed because retrocausality allowed it to be changed at the moment of its creation, literally going back in time and changing something in the past. In effect, the effect comes before the cause.
So, how does this work in the sense of, are we, there was that movie Arrival, and they were sort of talking about how the aliens existed or thought outside of space-time in a way that we didn't really understand. I don't know if I explained that very well, but...
That's the plot of the movie, yeah.
Okay, so...
They could predict the future because they weren't bound by... They didn't perceive time, so they just perceived everything happening to them all at once.
So is it possible
we
that
think time is linear? They did not in the movie, and it's quite possible that that's true. It may sound very strange, but look at it this way. If you live in a valley, you only see what's immediately around you in the valley. For instance, say you've never left the valley, there's high mountains, you can't cross them. You're in some village in the Middle Ages. So that's your world. That's your life. Yet someone who lives on top of the mountain can come down to the village, and they can tell you about things far, far away, and you can't understand how or why they can do that. It just shouldn't be possible. They must have some special vision or perception you don't have. Well, they do have a certain perception. They have a different perspective because they're on top of the mountain and you're down in that trapped valley. And it's the same sort of thing with time travel. Because we're trapped in the linear flow of time, we can't understand how something might exist outside of time. We can't understand how effect can come before cause, because in our world, cause always comes before effect. But yet, it is theoretically possible.
So is this the general belief of scientists now, or is this still somewhat fringe?
I don't think there's a single theory that scientists believe in generally. There's some that are much more supported than others by scientists. But, for instance, the E8 emergence theory of everything is able to make certain predictions about the universe, whereas string theory, which is the popular theory for physicists and quantum physicists alike, can't predict anything. We have not made a single prediction with string theory. Yet with the E8 theory, we can predict certain things. For instance, it predicts there should be a certain smallest unit of distance, and we have that. We call it the Planck length. It's the Planck limit. Nothing can be smaller than that. We also have a smallest measurement of time, GIF, and the E8 theory predicts that as well. The E8 theory also predicts retrocausality. So if the other two predictions are right, it could well be that that is true. Now, some physicists do like it. They do adhere to it. There's a marvelous YouTube video on it if you want to watch it sometime. It's about 25 minutes long. It really explains the E8 theory in depth. But a lot of physicists don't like the idea. But if I have to go with one of two theories, I'm probably going to go with the one that actually can make worthwhile predictions as to what things should be and have them turn out so that they are. Yeah. What good is a theory that doesn't predict anything?
Well, that's pretty much what the scientific method says, right? I mean, the value of a theory is based on its predictive ability. So it seems like that's perfectly in line with science.
They can all be changed. I mean, even Einstein might be wrong, although, God forbid I should say that on live radio. But so far, it hasn't happened. His theories of general relativity with regard to time, distortion, and dilation all seem to hold true. And he even says that we can't even define what the present moment is. If you're on Earth and you have a telescope that can see onto the surface of a planet 1,000 light years away, you're seeing someone that lived there 1,000 years ago. On that planet, if they look up into the sky, they see Earth as it was 1,000 years ago. And yet you're in the same time slice. But they see 1,000 years into the past, you see 1,000 years into the past, and you see them viewing the Earth through their telescope, but they're not seeing you. They're seeing the Earth the way it was 1,000 years ago. So time is truly relative, and it's not the stable, solid thing we used to think it is. I doubt if reality is, too, for that matter.
Man, I got a lot of questions for you, Rob. We're coming up on our first commercial break here. You're listening to Rob Shelsky here on Radio Wasteland. Come on back. We have a lot more questions. When it ran from you in a private detective overcoat, dirty dead man's shoes, the pretty things of Knightsbridge, lying for a minister of state, is a far cry from the nod and when it ran from you. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Rob Shelsky. We're talking about time travel evidence, and let's get into some of that, Rob. We understand, I get the concept, and that was one that I already kind of got because of, I'm a movie nut, and, between Interstellar and our satellites, I get the gravitational sort of change there, but, what kind of evidence other than that are we kind of looking at that has shown us that maybe this time travel has actually gone on?
Well, that's what I did in my book, or both my books on the subject. I look for different types of evidence. I look for anecdotal evidence of people, but usually always, when it's more than one person involved so that you have a verifiable data of more than one witness. I also look for physical evidence for time travel, and there's plenty of it, it seems. And also, you go at it through science, and that's so. Whenever I try to find evidence for something, I try to find different legs for it to stand on, and I don't take any one item as absolutely the quintessential piece of evidence, but rather the overall amount of evidence, the type of evidence, and what you can basically draw from the conclusions of it. For instance, they did find a ring watch in a tomb in China in the province of Siqing. That was in 2008. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Siqing or Siqing. And it was inside of the tomb was a casket. The casket was dated as being 400 years old, so the tomb had to have been even older, of course, to put the casket in it. While digging around the base of it, they found a tiny watch ring made of gold. The hand showed the time to be 6 minutes after 10. On the back of it was etched the word Swiss in origin. Now, no way were the Swiss making watches of any sort 400 years ago or more, let alone a ring watch. That was simply beyond their technology, way beyond it. And there are photographs of this watch. They're in my book, by the way, and you can get them on the Internet if you want to look it up. And this seems real. Now, is it a real watch or a facsimile? I don't know. They haven't taken it apart because it's too small and too old, and they're afraid it'll just crumble. But and we haven't heard whether the insides are actually make it a working watch or if it's a facsimile. But how did it get in the tomb that was sealed for 400 years? That's a pretty good physical example. We have lots of other physical examples as well. There are ladles found inside solid lumps of coal that date back 23 million years. They have found a handbell inside of a lump of coal, sealed inside of it, and there were witnesses when it was broken open. And this wasn't recently. This was not when hoaxes became popular. We're talking about for the last 300 years, this sort of thing has been going on. A lot of it took place in the 1800s, some of it in the 1700s, and some of it in the very early 1900s. But we have found ladles, handbells, even a kettle, iron kettle, sealed inside of coal. Now, miners dug this up, pulled it out, it broke open, and they find these things inside of it, or people are using it in their stove or oven or whatever, and they're finding these things inside of it, and we can't account for it. There's about 12,000 screws that range in size from about 1.5 inches down to nano size, like a thousandth of an inch. The bigger ones are made of copper, and the smaller ones are made of various alloys, including titanium.
Wow.
Now, various estimates date these screws back because of where they were buried and how deeply they were buried in the Ural Mountains area, along a river and a tributary there, at least 20,000 years, possibly as much as several million years.
Yeah,
Now, who in the heck was burying nano-sized screws 20,000 or more years ago? It wasn't human beings, supposedly. And we found other evidence as well. We have found evidence of stuff that was buried in rocks that date back 239 million years. And we can't figure out how it got there. And the list is almost endless. Things that are out of place. They're called OOPArt, by the way. There's a machined piece of aluminum, highly polished, that was found in a dig in Germany that couldn't possibly have been there because they hadn't even discovered aluminum or even learned how to refine it. And so archaeologists say, oh, it's an anomaly or it's a hoax, even though many of these have been corroborated by famous scientists and archaeologists of the day, or they simply refuse to talk about it at all. They just won't discuss it.
Yeah, a book I really enjoyed was Forbidden Archaeology, Michael Cremo. And in there he was citing he's coming at it from a different angle, but they were talking about like a human footprint that was like 1 billion years old or something. And my first thought was that humans weren't around at the time, that we're dealing with a time traveler that basically left a footprint.
Right. There was a footprint supposedly found in the same fossil record as a trilobite, which does date back a long time ago, not 1 billion years, but close. And there also was a footprint found that was along with dinosaur tracks. I believe that one was found in Texas along a riverbed, if I got the right one. But that was a little questionable because the footprint could actually be a footprint of a type of dinosaur that left an imprint that looked sort of like a human foot.
Really?
Yeah, but so to me, I didn't include that in my book. Not that it's not true, not that it may not be an actual piece of evidence, but I tried to go for the most solid forms of evidence I could find. And there's also anecdotal evidence and even police records of strange things happening. There are people who've been injured in what appeared to be time travel. There was a camping group down in Peru. They went up into the mountains. They saw a cabin. They approached it. Lights were on. They were curious. They got closer. The lights turned out to be sconces and torches lit, and inside people were dancing and having a party in 16th century style dress. One woman in the group decided she was going to go in and see what was going on. She started to walk through the doorway, and her friend pulled her back at the last minute. But just as she did it, she felt an awful chill in the left side. I think it was her left side. It might have been her right side of her body. And they pulled her out, and she was suffering hemiplegia, which literally means half her body was paralyzed. She went to the doctor. He confirmed it was hemiplegia, has no idea why. He checked her brain scans, and one side of her brain was showing highly disturbed electrical current in it. He doesn't know why, and to this day she's still paralyzed. So, and then they went back, and there was no sign of anyone having been there at all. The place was like an old deserted cabin. And,
so is the premise there that it's like half her body aged or was somehow damaged by a rip or something like that?
Well, apparently half of her was transferring to one time, and the other half hadn't done it yet, and she was jerked back before she completed the transition, and she was left in a state of semi-paralysis. And there's so many accounts of this. Now, the records of her are there. They're verifiable. The doctor's statements are verifiable. So there was about 5 people, I think, in the group, and they all attest to the facts. So, again, that seems fairly solid evidence that something very bizarre happened. And this sort of thing just goes on. I mean, there are so many cases I could tell you that are like this, where groups of people are involved. There's one in England. They were having a barbecue. A guy's dog was tied under a tree. A thunderstorm came up. Lightning started playing around, and so he went out to get his dog. As he did, he was struck by lightning. He seemed to have disappeared. No one could find him. The people called in the police. It's a matter of court record, or at least police records. They searched for him. They couldn't find him nowhere, anywhere. And they kind of gave up. And then 3 days later, he appeared down by the pond, or there was some kind of water near the place. I don't know if it was a pond or a lake or what, but he had 1 foot in the water, 1 foot out, and they discovered him standing there, and it was exactly as he had been standing when he disappeared. And when interviewed by the police and his friends, he couldn't account for the 3 days that he had lost. And this goes on and on and on.
Wow.
So what do, like in the case of the screws and stuff like that, what do archaeologists make of these things when they get them? that it's a mistake, or?
It's an anomaly. It's a hoax. 12,000 screws all up and down the length of one river and one of its tributaries. Some of them bury as much as 40 feet deep, but somehow they're either an anomaly or a hoax. Who in the heck would salt that length of a river, dig that deep to plant these things, some 12,000 of them so far, and they're still finding more, and try to perpetrate a hoax that would only bring some small notoriety, and not to them because no one knows who did it if it was a hoax. It's highly unlikely it was a hoax. I mean, something is, you have to use Occam's razor. If there's more than one explanation for something, you have to go with the simplest. And the simplest isn't that it was a hoax. The simplest is that those screws are real and were buried there sometime 20,000 years or maybe even several million years earlier along that river. Another example in the Ural Mountains is they found the Dashka stone, is the map of creation. It's huge, it's really heavy, it's big, and it appears to be 3 layers of rock bonded together, and on it is depicted a map of the region. Now, on this map, there are dams along the rivers, there are channels, there is irrigation, and the map looks as if it's a 3D sort of map, and it looks as if it was done from about 30,000 feet in the air. Now, there are none of these giant dams or channels well, one river even was made to reverse its flow, apparently, from what they saw on the map. Now, they estimated they would have had to have moved 1 quadrillion tons of earth to create these things. And this dates back millions of years, this map. And also, they don't know how the stone was bonded together. There's 2 sublayers. There's a base layer, then a layer with the map on it, and then on top of that is a clear layer that seems to be bonded to it, and no one knows how. And also, the legends are that this is only one piece of a much larger map. So someone was doing a megalithic sort of map of the area, apparently millions of years ago.
Yeah, man, that is absolutely mind-blowing. Rob, we're coming up on our next commercial break here. You're listening to Rob Shelsky here on Radio Wasteland. Come on back. In times like these, top of days for which they still wait. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Rob Shelsky. Rob, so does any of this evidence, it feels like all the evidence that we're talking about comes from times like now and earlier. Does any of it seem to come from the future?
No, actually not. There's a lot of stuff on the Internet of people coming into the past and talking about the future. I've investigated those thoroughly, and most of them seem to be hoaxes or unprovable. John Teeter was a hoax, the famous John Teeter. Even the man from Torred, although I won't claim that it's a hoax, I can find no evidence to corroborate that it actually happened, that the event took place, where the guy went to Japan with his passport from a country called Torred, which lay between France and Spain. Great story, but there's absolutely no articles that I can find, newspaper clippings or anything of the sort, at the time that this was supposed to have occurred to support it. It just floats there. So, and also there are cases of people on the Internet claiming to be from the future. There's one young guy who lives in a basement, claims he was from the future, and they also claim that he passed a lie detector test. Well, they're interviewing the guy and videoing him. Why didn't they video the lie detector test? And if they did video it, which they didn't, I mean, they should have done it at a reliable place like a police department or some bona fide lie detector company that would be neutral in the case. So all we have is the word of the people who did the video that he successfully passed a lie detector test. And that, for me, is insufficient. I'm not saying he's lying. I'm not saying it's a hoax. I'm simply saying there's insufficient evidence to support that particular story for me. So, no, I haven't found anything yet from the future that would corroborate this.
Yeah, I was thinking more down the lines of the screws, maybe being made in a way that we don't even use them now or something like that. Or...
Well, the screws, for instance, we don't know what their function was. We call them screws. It's the closest thing we can approximate to screws. But we're not sure exactly what the use was. We're not sure why they range so in sizes. And we're not sure what their function or why they were made. We don't know, and of course that leaves it open to conjecture. Could they have come from the future? Could someone have? If you want evidence of people coming from the future, I think there is, and I think it's buried in all these archaeological digs that people are finding in, like with these screws or the map of the Creator's Stone. People have been traveling into the past, our past, because humans simply didn't live on this planet 239 million years ago. We know that for a fact. So, but someone was here. Someone was leaving stuff behind. Someone was leaving stuff behind that later became embedded inside of coal and sandstone and other types of rock. There's one like a hammer that was found that was fossilized. Well, actually, fossilization can occur rather rapidly under the right conditions, so I discounted that, and that's not in my book. I'm talking about stuff that was sealed in solid stone that was dug up from coal mines and other places and quarries. That is pretty much hard to argue was found where it was found and by the people it was found. Numbers of people involved. The object is real. You can find some of them in museums, including one in the Smithsonian. So this is pretty concrete evidence of something weird going on.
So what about, the government, Philadelphia experiment, anything like that? Do we have anything that suggests to us that the government knows a lot more about this than we're suspecting?
Oh, indeed, the government may know a lot more about it than we do, and probably does. The Philadelphia experiment may have taken place, but if it was, there is very little evidence to support it now. I mean, we only have the one man's word. The other people on board the ship that supposedly survived it made no such claims. The logs of the ship don't show that it was where it was supposed to be when it occurred, and no one saw it in the other places that is supposedly transported to. So it's pretty hard for me to, again, could it have happened? Yes. And it may well have, but I can't find enough evidence to support it to put it in my book.
Yeah,
and I'm really hard on evidence. I'm a sort of a hard evidence kind of guy.
Yeah.
So this one's going to go out there and maybe get a little bit wacky, but some people have said that things like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot, having to do with quartz and some sort of time portal thing there. Is there any evidence following down the lines of that?
None that I can find. Absolutely none. There may be creatures that exist. We have discovered animals that we thought were extinct for millions of years. A type of shark, for instance, that we thought was gone, that lived 75 million years ago. We thought it was long gone, but we have since discovered that it's alive and well and living in the oceans. But they're not common. We never used to think giant squids existed, yet they do. And so we're discovering new things all the time. But no, I haven't found any evidence for that sort of thing yet.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but I figured I'd throw it out there for some of our listeners because, that's one of the things for some of these paranormal topics that they're always falling back on,
So
I'm not saying that it couldn't be possible. I'm just saying that I couldn't find evidence to support it.
Yeah, so as of right now, with what we know about time, if we wanted to send a person back in time, in terms of, physical theory, how would that work? I mean, if we want to send someone to the future,
right now. We don't have the means to do it, but unless we find some new laws of physics that make it easier, you would basically have to have the power of a sun or a number of suns to do it. You'd have to be able to come up with negative energy, and we do know that negative energy exists through the Casimir effect, but we can't harness it in any way yet. In our time, it's highly unlikely that it's possible to do it.
Right.
But we are learning more about physics all the time.
Yeah.
When I grew up,